Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we will travel to Wild West. If you've ever wondered what it would really feel like to arrive in the Wild West, with a thin coin purse, a tired horse, and absolutely no idea what you're doing, this sleep story is your ticket. We'll ride in on a worn stagecoach, explore a rough little town, learn the quiet rules that keep you alive, and ease into the vast silence of the frontier night. Slip on your headphones, dim the lights, and let the story turn your room into a small, creaking inn at the edge of the world. If this cozy story helps you drift off, please subscribe, tap like, and leave a gentle comment. Your support keeps the journey continues. Out here, the road doesn't really end. It just gets tired and forgets what it was doing. The coach you're riding in has long since left the last proper town behind. What used to be a clear track has slowly frayed into ruts and dust, so that now the wheels are following habit more than anything else. Every jolt runs straight up through the wooden seat into your spine. The leather strap under your hand is warm from the sun, sticky against your glove. Somewhere above you, a trunk thumps on the roof like it's trying to vote for turning around. The driver calls something to the horses. You don't quite catch the words over the rattling, but you know the meaning. Almost there. Keep going. You could say the same thing to yourself. The town appears slowly, as if someone dropped a handful of wooden buildings into the middle of the world and then walked away. No walls, no gate, no neat welcome sign. Just a main street scratched into the dust, a few low facades leaning against the light, a skinny water tower standing on spidery legs. Beyond them, the land just keeps going, wide and calm and completely unconcerned that you've arrived. The coach shudders to a stop. For a moment you stay seated, listening to the ticking of cooling metal, feeling the strange quiet after hours of constant movement. Then you step down. Your boots sink a little into the pale dust. It's soft and powdery, churned by hooves and wagon wheels and a lot of people who all thought this was a good idea before you. It clings instantly to your trousers, to the edges of your coat. The air smells of horse sweat, leather, wood smoke, and something frying that you hope is food and not an experiment. You tug the brim of your slightly too big hat down against the sun. Back where you came from, a hat might have been an accessory. Here, it's just a small portable roof. This is your first challenge in the Wild West. Nothing here has edges you can see. The last building on the street doesn't lead into suburbs or signs. It just fades into open land. On a map, that's an inch of blank space. Standing here, that inch is days of walking, a lot of sun, and a very real question about where your next drink of water might come from. You hear the driver swing back up to his seat. The coach rolls away in a swirl of dust, taking with it your easiest option for going back. You watch it shrink down the road until it's just movement in the haze, then gone. The town settles around you in the silence it leaves behind. You pick up your bag, lighter than you'd like, heavier than you expected. A bedroll, a change of clothes, a few letters, a canteen, your thin stack of coins. That's your kit for surviving a landscape that doesn't even notice you're standing on it. You decide that before you worry about cattle or gold or grand adventure, you should probably make sure you have a place to sleep that isn't under a wagon. A narrow building with rooms and board painted across its front in letters that lean at odd angles seems promising. The steps creak as you climb them. The door sticks for a moment and then gives way with a soft groan, as if it's slightly offended by the effort. Inside, the light is dim and yellow. It smells of old wood, cooking fat, and the faint, damp note of cloth that's been hung to dry and almost managed it. A woman behind a small counter looks up from her ledger. Her sleeves are rolled, her hair is pinned back, and her eyes do a quick sweep of you that probably tells her more than any form you could fill out. "Room?" she asks. You say yes, and now you're up against another frontier challenge. How much of your money do you turn into comfort tonight, knowing you might need it badly later? Somewhere inside you, a soft, modern voice that suggests a big bed and a hot bath. Somewhere closer to your coin purse, a very practical voice quietly proposes the cheapest mattress that won't give you splinters. A few minutes later, you find yourself in a small room under the eaves. The ceiling slopes. A little square window looks out over the street. The bed is a wooden frame with a straw mattress and a wool blanket folded on top. There's a washstand, a cracked basin, and a stubborn bar of soap. It isn't luxury, but the mattress gives a little when you press your hand into it, rustling softly. and the room smells faintly of dry grass and lamp oil. For tonight it's enough, learning to say this will do and mean it is its own kind of survival skill. You pour some water from the pitcher into the basin and wash the dust from your face. It turns the water cloudy almost instantly. The day has already left its mark on you, and it's only just begun. Your stomach puts in a quiet request for attention. Downstairs, there was talk of supper. You have time first to walk the street to see what you've actually signed up for. The air outside has changed. The sun is lower now, shining straight down the street so that every bit of dust glows. You cross to the general store, its front window crowded with boots, pots, a coil of rope, folded cloth, and a few items that look like they might be either tools or weapons, depending on how your day's going. A small bell rings when you push the door open. Inside, the smell of flour and leather and dried goods wraps around you. Barrels stand along one wall. Shelves behind the counter hold tins and jars in neat, hopeful rows. A clerk looks up and nods, already measuring how long you might last here. You drift along the shelves, looking at things through new eyes. A tin cup is no longer just a cup. It's what you'll use for water, for coffee, for whatever kind of stew your future self works out how to make. A small sack of beans is more than food. It's the sort of reliable friend that doesn't complain if you eat it 3 nights in a row. Coffee suddenly feels less like a treat and more like equipment. You lay out a few coins carefully. Every purchase is a guess about what might happen. A long day in the sun, a night in camp, a week between steady meals. You're not just shopping, you're placing small bets on your own future clumsiness and resilience. The clerk wraps your things in brown paper. As he hands them over, he nods toward the canteen at your side. "Keep that full," he says. Creek Out West looks friendly till it decides not to. Don't count on it. You nod and file that away with all the other invisible notes you're starting to collect. Water is not background here. It's an ongoing decision. By the time supper is served back at the inn, you are discovering another of the West's rules. Hunger improves every recipe. The plate in front of you holds beans, bread, and something that used to be closer to an animal than you like to think about. It's hot and you're tired, and together those things make it delicious. Around you people talk the way people talk everywhere, about weather and work and who's arriving on the next coach. But tucked inside their stories is the shape of what might go wrong here. A trail washed out by the last week's storm. A rider who pushed for 1 more mile and ended up sleeping in the open, cold and annoyed. A well that went low one dry summer and taught the whole town to be careful. They don't speak in warnings, but you hear the warnings anyway. Out here, misjudging doesn't always mean inconvenience. Sometimes it just means more dust, more hunger, more tired. Later in your small room, you light the lamp and take stock. Your canteen isn't full enough. Your coins look thinner on the table than they did back home in your hand. Your boots are already scuffed with this place. You feel a little of the day's strain in your back and legs. A reminder that out here you'll be carrying yourself a lot more literally than you're used to. Still, you have a bed, you have food enough for tomorrow, you have a roof, even if part of it slopes like it's unsure. It's a start. You blow out the lamp. The room goes dark except for the faint silver outline of moonlight through the window. Somewhere outside a horse shifts, hooves knocking softly against wood. A few last voices drifting up from the street, then fade. In that thin square of moonlit air above the floor, you can see dust moving, just a little, rising and falling in tiny slow spirals before settling. The same dust that swallowed the road as you arrived is settling now on the windowsill and the empty chair, settling into this room, settling around you. Tomorrow you'll have to learn more. The unspoken rules, the faces to trust, the small mistakes that cost more out here than they would anywhere else. You'll find out what happens when distances stretch longer than you expect, when the heat presses down harder, when you misread the land or your own limits. But that's tomorrow's work. Tonight, on a straw mattress under a sloping roof at the edge of the map, your first lesson is simpler. Let the dust settle, let your thoughts slow, let the West stay outside the window for a while. You pull the blanket up, feel its rough warmth, and close your eyes. The town breathes around you, creaking and quiet. Somewhere in the dark, a new life is waiting for you to step into it. You wake to the sound of someone hammering somewhere in the street below. For a moment you forget where you are. The low ceiling, strange mattress. The smell of dry straw and lamp oil. all hover without names. Then you hear a horse snort, close and real, and it clicks back into place. You're at the edge of the map, in a town that hasn't quite decided what it wants to be when it grows up. Light pushes around the edges of the shutter. Your back feels the kind of stiff that says the bed was technically horizontal, but not entirely committed to comfort. You swing your legs over the side, plant your feet on the cool floorboards, and remember that surviving this place isn't just weather and water and food, it's people. Back home, if you wanted to know whether a place was safe, you could check reviews. 5 stars, great service. 1 star, left with fewer teeth than you arrived with. Here, your rating system is more analog. You walk in and every set of eyes does a quick, silent survey. Your posture, your boots, the way you stand in a doorway. These are the stars you're graded on now. You dress, splash your face, and take 1 quiet breath before you open the door. Today's task. Learn the unspoken rules before you step on them. Downstairs in the inn, the common room is half full. The air smells of coffee and pan bread and a day that hasn't made up its mind yet. A few people sit at tables, shoulders hunched over tin cups. A man near the window cradles his hand around a mug like it's the only warm thing left in the world. Another is tying his neckerchief, getting ready to head out. You choose a seat that is neither too central nor in the darkest corner. Out here, the middle path isn't just philosophy, it's good furniture strategy. As you eat, you watch how others move. The woman from last night with the small child nods to the innkeeper and leaves a neat stack of coins counted twice. The group of cowhands by the door joke loudly with one another, but their voices drop a little when the innkeeper passes, as if the room itself has a dignity they don't want to disturb. A man in a worn coat says good morning to the table as a whole, not to any person in particular. The room answers with a soft, scattered murmur. It's not formal exactly, but there's a rhythm here. People greet, they pay, they don't linger at tables once they're done. No one needs to announce the rules because everyone seems to already know them. Except, of course, you. You finish your coffee and decide that if you're going to misunderstand anything today, you might as well do it in daylight. Outside, the street is a little busier than yesterday afternoon. Sunlight lays itself down in strips along the ground, highlighting the ruts and prints and the small stubborn weeds pushing up where wagons have not yet crushed them. Someone leads a mule past, coaxing, the animal clearly in no hurry to face whatever its job is. A couple of children chase each other near the water trough, kicking up dust that tries to join in. You pick a direction and walk, aiming for what looks like the main cluster of activity. The general store, a blacksmith shop, and of course the saloon. The word saloon over the door is big and self-confident, the letters painted with enough enthusiasm to cover a second building. If this town has a social centre, this is it. You pause just outside the swinging doors, feeling unexpectedly like someone about to enter a very different kind of bar for the first time. You know in a vague way that there are rules. Don't crowd the bar, don't insult anyone's horse, don't stare too long at anyone who looks like they've had a hard life and an easy relationship with fists. You just don't know the specifics. You push the doors open with what you hope is a calm hand. They flap inward, and you step into cooler air that smells of wood, old smoke, something sour, and something sweet. Light filters through dusty windows, catching floating specks as if the room is full of slow, quiet snow. Conversations dip for a heartbeat. You're used to the feeling of walking into a room where people glance up, see you, and go back to their business. Here their attention lingers for just a second longer. Not hostile, just curious. Cataloguing. You take off your hat, automatically, and that seems to ease something in the air. A few people turn back to their drinks, their cards, their morning arguments. You make your way to the bar, not too quickly, not too slow, just a person who belongs here at least enough to order something. The bartender, broad-shouldered and calm, wipes at a spot on the counter that almost certainly isn't going anywhere. He looks you over the way people do when they're trying to place you into a category. Local, stranger, trouble, or some combination of the three. What'll it be, he asks. Coffee, you say. It feels like the safest answer. Coffee doesn't pick fights. He pours from a pot that's been sitting since some unspecified time in the past and slides the cup toward you. You set a coin down. He glances at it, at you, then gives a brief nod and leaves it where it is. transaction accepted. This is how you start to survive socially here, not with speeches, but with 100 tiny proofs that you understand how things are done. Hat off indoors, pay as you go, don't take someone else's coffee that's already been poured and placed just so at their spot at the bar. That's as personal as taking their actual chair. You sip and pretend you're not listening to everyone else, while very much listening to everyone else. At a table to your left, 2 men in trail-worn clothes are discussing a cattle drive. The words are simple: long days, bad weather, decent pay. But under that you hear the pattern: who they trust and who they think talks too much, which ranchers are fair, which ones are difficult in ways that could get you hurt or hungry. At a table in the corner, a pair of younger hands argue over a card game, poking at each other with the safety of long familiarity. It's all information, disguised as gossip. Then the saloon doors stir again, and a different kind of attention moves through the room. You feel it before you understand why. A man steps in, badge pinned to his vest, hat tilted back. He moves like someone who doesn't need to make space for himself. The room does it for him. The sheriff, you guess, or someone close to that role. The bartender straightens a little. A few people nod. One of the card players pays sudden, intense attention to their hand. You watch the way the sheriff stands. Not rigid, not loose, just aware. His eyes move over the tables in a steady sweep, not lingering too long on anyone, but touching everyone. When they pass over you, you remember to nod. Not too eager, not too casual, just an "I exist, and I am currently not causing problems" kind of nod. He tips his hat just enough to acknowledge you. There's your first check-in with the law of this place. If you were to run into trouble here, and you don't intend to, but life is fond of surprises, the sheriff is the person who might decide whether that trouble expands or quietly collapses. Out here, the law is part rulebook, part suggestion, and part the personality of whoever is wearing the badge at the moment. He orders a drink, talks in low tones with the bartender, then steps aside to scan a wanted poster tacked near the wall. You glance at it too, more out of curiosity than anything. The face on the paper looks like it's had an argument with several lifetimes. The reward offered is more money than you've seen in one place in a long time. You wonder briefly what it would be like to choose that kind of life, where your picture becomes a warning sign. Then you decide you prefer learning how to stay out of posters altogether. You finish your coffee and move away from the bar, giving someone else room to step in. Another small unwritten rule: linger too long in the prime spots and people start to notice for the wrong reasons. On your way out, a man older than you by a decade or 3 catches your eye. He's sitting at a table near the wall, nursing his drink the way some people nurse old grudges. "New, aren't you?" he says. Not really a question. "Just arrived," you admit. He studies you for a beat. "Word of advice, he says. If somebody asks where you're from, answer. If they ask what you're running from, don't." There's a whole survival manual in that one line. You nod your thanks. He dips his chin toward your cup. "And don't start a tab your pockets can't keep up with," he adds. Town's got a good memory for debts, better than for favours mostly. You step back into the daylight feeling like you've passed a very small, very quiet test. The rest of the day unfolds in little lessons. At the general store you see someone try to argue prices loudly, and watch how the room pulls away from them. Not dramatically, just a shift of shoulders, a few looks exchanged, a shared sense of, this is not how we do things here. The clerk stays polite, but their voice cools by a few degrees. You make a note. Don't haggle like a thunderstorm. You stroll past the sheriff's office and see the door propped open. Inside, a desk, a couple of wooden chairs, a stove in the corner, a wall with more posters. A dog sleeps under the desk, belly rising and falling, entirely at peace. The law here, you think, is more tired than theatrical. A few people to stretch over a lot of land. Another reminder that you survive best by avoiding the need for their attention. You help a man pick up a crate that's fallen from a wagon, nails spilling like silver seas into the dust. Together you crouch and scoop them back into the box. His thanks is brief, but later you notice him at the inn, and he gives you a nod that lasts a fraction longer than politeness requires. This is how reputation is built here. One small practical kindness at a time. You could, in theory, make very different choices. You could take someone's seat at the bar just to see what happens. You could ignore a debt. You could laugh at the wrong joke, or not laugh at a story that everyone else seems to find important. You suspect what would happen isn't immediate drama, but something more subtle. Doors that don't open quite as easily. Faces that look past you when work is being offered. Rooms that go quiet when you step in. Surviving the Wild West isn't all stampedes and showdowns. A lot of it is this: learning how not to be the story people are shaking their heads about over breakfast. As the day leans toward evening, you find yourself back at the inn, watching the town shift into its softer version. Lanterns are lit along the fronts of buildings, each one throwing out a small circle of yellow that pushes the dark back just enough. Voices drift from the saloon, lower now, the tired end of laughter. Somewhere a fiddle starts up, its notes rising over the boardwalk like a suggestion that maybe, despite everything, people still know how to enjoy themselves. You stand for a moment by the door, hat in your hands, feeling the day settle inside you. You have not yet memorized all the rules here, but you've learned that greetings matter, that debts echo, and that the way you carry yourself down this dusty street will be remembered, for good or ill. You climb the stairs to your room, the boards creak in familiar spots. In your little space under the roof, you light the lamp and watch the flame steady. Out the window, the street is a ribbon of shadow and lamplight. In that faint glow, dust moves lazily through the air, rising and falling, looking for somewhere to settle. Today it settled on your shoulders, your boots, the brim of your hat. It settled on the way you nodded to the sheriff, on the coin you left for the bartender, on the nails you helped gather from the ground. Each small decision resting quietly, adding up to the beginning of a reputation. You blow out the lamp, the room exhales into darkness. Voices outside drift and fade. Somewhere a dog barks once, then thinks better of it. Tomorrow will bring other kinds of challenges. The long road out of town, the wide spaces between here and the next place. The work that stretches your muscles and your patience. But tonight, as you lie back and feel the mattress rustle beneath you, it's enough to know that you've begun to learn how to stand in a room, how to sit at a table, how to let this town see you without flinching. Out in the street, the dust is settling again. By the time you've been in town a few days, you start to notice that the horizon is always tugging at you. It sits out there beyond the last building, wide and calm and pretending not to be interesting. But every time a rider comes in dusty and tired, or a wagon rolls out with provisions stacked high, it's like the edge of the world clears its throat and says, "Well, are you coming or not?" Work in a place like this usually involves leaving the comfort of walls, so it's not a surprise when someone finally looks you over and says, "You ride?" You say yes, because you do, mostly in the way that involves staying approximately on top of the horse more often than not. The man asking is the same one you helped with the spilled crate of nails. Today he stands beside a rangy bay horse, saddle cinched, reins loose in his hand. Behind him, beyond the last building, you can see open country waiting. "Got a small drive heading out," he says. "Moving some stock a few days down. Extra hand wouldn't hurt if you can stay in the saddle and not argue with the trail boss." You decide that sounds like an achievable life goal. Don't fall off. Don't argue. So you find yourself standing beside a horse that is giving you a measured look, as if evaluating your qualifications. Its coat is dusty, its mane a little tangled. The saddle creaks as you put your weight into the stirrup. Leather worn smooth. The familiar feel of a horn under your palm as you swing over. The ground falls away, and suddenly you're taller than the town, looking over wagon tops and roofs, seeing the street in a new perspective. The group is small. A trail boss with a hat that has seen everything. 2 younger hands, your nail crate acquaintance, and you. A modest string of cattle waits beyond the last fence, tails flicking, heads occasionally lifting with puzzled suspicion, as if they're not entirely convinced this relocation plan includes enough grass. The trail boss runs through the basics. Stay with the herd, don't crowd them, don't let them scatter. Mind the river crossing, listen more than you talk. His voice is dry, his eyes sharp. You nod because you do understand most of the words, even if you're not sure yet what they feel like in practice. And then the town is behind you. The change is surprisingly quick. One moment there are buildings and wells and the faint sound of someone hammering. The next, there's just ground and sky and the small travelling world of your crew and the cattle. The air smells different out here. More grass, more sun-baked earth, less smoke and stale beer. When the wind moves, it brings a wide, empty sort of quiet that you don't get in streets. This is another challenge of the West. The outdoors isn't a place you visit on weekends. It's the hallway between every room of your life. As you ride, you realise there's a whole language happening around you. The trail boss whistles a certain way, and the rider on the left nudges his horse forward to close a gap. Another call, and the Young's hand drifts backward, bringing a straying cow back into the group with an easy sweep. There's barely any shouting, almost no drama, just a steady, patient kind of guidance. Your job is simple for now. Keep your place, keep your eyes open, and try not to look like you're about to overthink the art of sitting down. The ground is not flat. It only looks that way from town. Out here, you feel every rise and dip through the horse's movement. Small gullies, dry creek beds, patches of rock that make the hooves ring differently. The sun climbs, and with it the heat. Your hat earns its keep. Your canteen bumps lightly against your side. A constant reminder of the clerk's advice. Keep it full when you can, because when you can't comes around quickly. Hours stretch. The rhythm settles in, the creak of leather, the soft clank of tack, the low murmur of the herd. Some part of your mind, the part used to clocks and schedules, fidgets at first, but the rest of you begins to match the slow, steady pace of the animals. Step, breathe, sway with the saddle. You can feel your muscles quietly rewriting their complaints into acceptance. Around midday, the trail boss raises a hand. The small caravan eases to a halt near a stand of scrubby trees that looks, at first glance, like it couldn't possibly be useful. But there's a trickle of shade, a hint of breeze, and a suggestion of green that tells the animals there's graze. You swing down from the saddle, legs stiff, knees briefly surprised to be part of this arrangement. The earth is warm under your palm when you steady yourself. You loosen the cinch a notch, give the horse's neck a grateful pat. Its hide is hot, damp where the reins have rested, but its ear flicks back toward you, acknowledging your existence in that mild, horse-like way. Someone passes you a tin cup. The coffee is strong and tastes faintly of smoke and metal and a long morning, and somehow that's exactly what you want. You chew on a piece of jerky that may once have been related to an animal, and a biscuit that has definitely seen better days, and you realise that hunger is still your best seasoning out here. As you rest, your gaze drifts across the land. It's not dramatic right here. No cliffs, no canyons, just rolling ground and scattered trees. But it has a quiet, serious beauty. The horizon is further away than your feet can really understand. The sky is so big it feels like it might tip down and touch your hat brim. It's humbling in her way that isn't entirely comfortable and isn't entirely unpleasant. You think about what might happen if you were out here alone, without the little cluster of moving life around you. A wrong turn, a cloud of dust in the wrong direction, a dry waterhole where a creek was supposed to be. Nothing especially cinematic, just a series of small, inconvenient surprises stacking up until they become dangerous. That's one of the quieter truths of this place. The wilderness doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just forgets to be helpful. When the break is over, you mount up again. The afternoon stretches forward, long and hazy. Your shoulders ache. You shift in the saddle, finding that perfect spot that doesn't exist. The cattle plod, heads bobbing. Once, a young steer decides that today is the day to explore a different career and peels off toward a patch of grass that caught its eye. You follow, a little too enthusiastically, and your horse responds with more energy than you ordered. For a few seconds, you are mostly momentum and hope. You manage to circle back, cheeks hot, heart beating faster than necessary. The younger hand nearby grins, not unkindly. "Best to turn 'em before they get ideas," he says. "Cows got more stubborn than sense." You decide not to ask whether that applies to riders too. By the time the sun tilts down, you're looking for a place to camp almost as much as the animals are. The trail boss chooses a slight rise near a narrow stream. The water is low but moving, a thin ribbon of sound. The ground is firm enough for a fire, soft enough for sleep, and that's about all you can ask for. Camp happens quickly, like a ceremony. Everyone but you knows by heart. Someone gathers wood, another scrapes out a shallow fire pit. Bedrolls appear like magic from saddles. One of the younger hands checks the herd, making sure they're settled, posting watch in the casual, practiced way of someone who's spent a lot of nights listening to cattle shuffle in the dark. You help where you can, stacking branches, filling the pot, unrolling your bed. The air cools as the sun drops. Colours fade from bright to muted, then to a soft grey that makes the world feel smaller and more intimate. The first spark catches in the kindling. The fire flickers into life, bright against the lengthening shadows. Sitting around that small circle of light, you feel the day begin to drain out of your bones. The pot on the fire sends up hopeful smells, beans again, with something extra this time that might be onion and might be optimism. Someone tells a story about a drive last season when a thunderstorm decided to move through the herd, and how they spent half the night coaxing panicked animals back into some kind of order. They tell it with humour, but there's a thread running through it. What might happen when the land and the sky decide to test you? Flooded crossings, sudden wind, lightning that picks its own targets. Not every risk is something you can muscle through. Some of them you just read, early and carefully, and adjust to. You glance up at the sky. Tonight, it's clear. Stars are starting to appear one by one, like someone poking tiny holes in the dark. It's beautiful in a way that makes your chest feel a little tight, like you've remembered something you didn't know you'd forgotten. When your turn at watch comes, you sit a little away from the fire, wrapped in your blanket, listening. The sounds of the night are different from the town's noises. Out here, every shuffle, every soft snort from the herd, every distant call means something. A coyote yips, thin and sharp, across the plain. Crickets chirp. The water murmurs over stones. Your own breathing sounds loud in your ears. You think about the other kinds of might happen that live in this darkness. A cow could spook and start a chain reaction. A horse could wander off if you didn't tie it properly. You could, in your inexperience, mistake something ordinary for something dangerous. Or worse, the other way around. And yet sitting here you don't feel afraid so much as awake. The world is big and you are small, and somehow that feels right. The West is not a thing to be conquered, you're realising. It's a thing to learn how to move within. By the time someone touches your shoulder and tells you to get some sleep, your vigilance is beginning to blur at the edges. You crawl into your bedroll, feeling the ground solid and uneven beneath you, the blanket heavy and surprisingly comforting. Above you, the sky is a wide, slow river of stars. The fire has burned down to coals, a low orange glow pulsing gently. The herd is a darker mass in the darkness, breathing and shifting. Around you, other sleepers exhale, turn, settle. You watch your own breath cloud faintly in the cool air and think about how far you are from that small room above the inn. No ceiling here, no walls, just distance and sky and the fragile, moving bubble of your camp. Tomorrow there will be more walking, more riding, more small lessons. Maybe the trail will cross a river running a little higher than expected. Maybe a storm will roll in from those innocent-looking clouds. Maybe your horse will decide, for reasons of its own, that a certain patch of shadow is deeply suspicious and should be avoided at a theatrical angle. Whatever happens, you'll face it with this little crew, with the skills you're slowly collecting, how to read a cloud, how to follow a faint track, how to see a line of dark green as a promise of water instead of just scenery. Your eyes grow heavy. The stars blur into each other. In the faint glow of the coals, you can see dust rising when someone shifts, then falling back to the ground, settling into cracks and hoof prints in the folds of your blanket. The same dust that lined the town street now lies out here under your back, a common fabric between all the places you've been so far. It settles, and slowly so do you. You let the road, the herd, the worries about what might happen tomorrow slide gently out of focus. The Wild West can be wide and stubborn and occasionally unhelpful, but right now, under this endless ceiling of stars, it's also a kind of cradle, rocking you with the soft sounds of night. You breathe in the cool air, breathe out the day, and let the trail keep going without you for a while, in your dreams. By the time you've ridden a few trails and slept under a few different slices of sky, the town doesn't feel quite as temporary as it did on that first dusty afternoon. You come back from the drive with sore knees, a little more money, and a quiet sense that you know the land now in a way you didn't before. The streets are the same, ruts and dust and boardwalks, the same crooked water tower, the same tin signs creaking on their hooks, but you see them differently. They're not just a cluster of buildings at the edge of nowhere anymore, they're a kind of anchor. And one evening, sitting at a corner table in the saloon with a bowl of stew, and a cup that's mostly coffee and not quite whiskey, someone asks you a different kind of question. Ever thought of staying put? The man talking is the trail boss, hat on the table, hands loose around his cup. His voice is casual, but the words land with a quiet weight. You shrug because up until now, staying put has been something that happened to other people. You've been measuring life in miles and nights, in how far you are from the next creek or the last town. There's a patch of land outside town, he continues. Good enough soil, needs fence and sweat. Fellow who started it, lit out, couldn't hack the winter. Owner's looking to let someone work it, keep a share. Could be you, if you've a mind to plant more than your boots. A small part of you immediately pictures endless work. Fences, digging, mending, worrying about weather like it's a demanding relative. Another part of you, quieter but stubborn, pictures 4 walls and a stove and a place where your bedroll doesn't have to move every week. The West, it turns out, has 2 kinds of survival. The kind where you keep going and the kind where you stop. A few days later, you're standing on the edge of that patch of land, turning in a slow circle, trying to see it the way someone else once did. It's not much to look at yet. A rough cabin with a roof that slouches a little in the middle. A fence line that starts, hopefully, and then gives up halfway across the field. A few gnarled stumps where someone tried to clear more ground and got distracted or discouraged. Grass, waist-high in places, rippling when the wind passes. There's a small creek at the far side, lined with willows and stones smooth from years of water saying the same thing over and over. The soil is dark when you scratch it with your boot heel. Not rich, maybe, but willing. You drop your small bundle of belongings on the warped porch and push open the cabin door. It sticks, then gives, just like every door out here seems to do at least once. The interior is one room that's trying its best. A corner where a stove squats, short stovepipe cutting across to the wall. A rough table, 2 chairs, one slightly more hopeful than the other. A shelf with a cracked plate, a tin cup, and a spoon that has clearly seen controversy. Sun streamers slant through gaps in the shutters, picking out dust in slow spirals. The floorboards creak under your feet. Your footsteps echo in the emptiness. You stand there and feel the shape of the decision settle over your shoulders like a coat. If you stay, this space is going to know you. It'll remember the pattern of your boots, the way you close the door, the places you drop your hat. It will be yours in a way no room you've rented by the night could ever be. All right, you say softly, to the air, to the cabin, to yourself. Let's see what we can do. Surviving the West as a settler isn't a single dramatic feat. It's 100 small jobs that always seem to need doing at the same time. You patch the roof first, mostly because rain has very clear opinions about where it wants to fall. You climb up with a hammer and a handful of nails, your fingers cold against the rough boards. From up here, the land seems to go on forever, the town a small cluster off in the distance. You tuck loose shingles back into place, nail down new ones where old ones have given up and mutter quiet encouragement to the whole structure, like you're talking to a skittish horse. Next comes the fence, post holes, dug with patient effort and occasional muttered commentary. You learn the feel of the soil, how it clings to the shovel when it hides stones just below the surface. Your hands blister, then toughen. Rails are lifted, set, nailed. The line of fence isn't perfectly straight, but then neither is the horizon, and that seems to be working fine. Inside, you sweep out the winter's worth of dust and spider ambition. You scrub the table, wash the cup, put your own few belongings on the shelf. A folded shirt, a small keepsake, your letters from home. The room doesn't look different to anyone else, probably, but to you it shifts ever so slightly from a place to my place. Planting is its own kind of gamble. You turn over the ground in neatish rows, the handle of the hoe warm and smooth in your palms. Seeds rattle in your hand like tiny hopes. You tuck them into the earth, one by one, covering them gently. It's a strange feeling, pouring effort into something you won't see for weeks, maybe months. You give them water from the creek, then stand there looking at a patch of dirt that looks exactly like a patch of dirt, and try to believe. Neighbours appear slowly, in that way people do when they're not sure yet if you're staying, but they also need to borrow things. A woman from the next homestead overrides up one afternoon, reins in with a practiced flick, and asks if you've got a spare length of rope. You do, just barely, and you lend it. 2 days later it comes back coiled a little neater than you gave it, with a fresh loaf of bread balanced on top. No one says the words, but the message is clear. You're in the circuit now. You help, you get helped. On Sundays, or the closest thing the town has to them, you sometimes ride back in. The saloon feels less like a risk and more like a routine now. Someone always nods when you walk in, and it's not the nod they give a stranger. The innkeeper remembers how you take your coffee. The clerk in the store knows your name, or at least the general sound of it, and sometimes asks how the creek is running. You hear talk of the rail line creeping closer, of new folks arriving with big ideas and small supplies. More fences going up, more fields being turned. The wild of the West, you realise, isn't gone, but it's changing shape. The drama dulls at the edges, the everyday takes over. The weather is still the loudest voice in your life. In summer, heat settles on your shoulders like an extra shirt you can't take off. You work in the early morning and the late evening, letting the middle of the day slide by in a slow shimmer of light, while you hide in the shade with a tin cup of water and a shirt damp at the neck. In autumn, the air turns sharp. You bring in what your small patch of earth has decided to give you: crooked carrots, proud little potatoes, beans that have climbed your makeshift poles with surprising ambition. You spread them on the table, count them, and feel the solid, simple satisfaction of knowing some part of winter is already taken care of. Winter itself is both test and teacher. The wind comes down from the hills and rattles the shutters, pokes at every crack it can find. You learn the art of stuffing gaps with rags, of banking the fire just right so it sleeps but does not die. The sound of wood popping in the stove becomes your favourite music. On the coldest nights, the stars outside the window look closer and harder, like chips of ice. Your breath steams sun in the air before the stove really gets going. You wrap yourself in a blanket at the table, mending clothes by lamplight, your fingers stiff but growing more sure with each patch. It's work, but it's also oddly peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Sometimes the winter wins around. A cold snaps in before you finish stacking wood, and you spend a few days cursing your optimistic estimates. A storm buries the path to the creek, and you find out just how long you can make one bucket of water do the job of 3. A roof patch leaks a thin, irritating drip that you catch in a bowl until the weather lets you climb up and fix it properly. None of it is dramatic enough to write ballads about, but all of it is survival. One more day of solving small problems so the big ones don't have room to show up. There are evenings when loneliness sits at the table with you, when the only voices are the wind and the stove and whatever you say out loud to keep from feeling foolishly quiet. You think of people left behind elsewhere, of streets that stayed lit at all hours, of conversations that didn't have to wait for the next ride into town. Then on another day, a neighbour rides up needing help with a broken axle. You spend the afternoon under a wagon, wood shavings in your hair, your fingers numb from holding tools in the cold. When it's done, you both stand back and admire the not quite straight but definitely functional result. You share a laugh that's mostly relief. As they ride off, you realise the loneliness has shifted. You're not alone. You're just farther from some things and closer to others. Months pass, seasons turn, slowly. Without you noticing it happen all at once, you become part of the furniture of the place. The sheriff nods to you in that way reserved for people who are unlikely to cause paperwork. The saloon regulars include you in conversations without stopping to explain the backstory. A new hand in town asks you whether the creek to the west is reliable, and you find yourself saying, "She's moody, don't count on her," in the exact tone the clerk used with you what feels like a lifetime ago. One afternoon, a stagecoach rattles into the town and you're there, tying your horse outside the store. The coach grinds to a halt. A cloud of dust lifts, then settles. The door swings open, and someone steps down, squinting into the light, bag in hand, hat slightly askew. You know that look. It's the expression of someone who has just realised the road doesn't end so much as dissolve, and that they are suddenly, thoroughly here. For a second, you see yourself in them, the way you were on that first day. New boots not yet broken in, a mind full of ideas and exactly no idea what those ideas will cost. You catch their eye, nod, and say the words you would have wanted to hear. "Inn's that way," you offer. Rooms are small, but the roof doesn't leak much. General store's decent. Keep your canteen full. Folks are mostly kind if you are too. They nod, a little relieved, a little overwhelmed. The dust rolls around their ankles as they move away toward the same steps you once climbed. You turn back to your horse, tighten the cinch, and feel an unexpected warmth in your chest. You're no longer just surviving the West. You're part of the quiet system that helps other people survive it too. That night you sit at your table in the cabin. The stove hums softly, its sides warm under your palm when you check it. A pot simmers, sending up the gentle, homely smell of stew. Outside, the wind has found something new to rattle, but inside, everything is in its place. Your coat on its hook, your boots by the door, your letters neatly tied on the shelf. You light the lamp, then turn it down low. The room glows in a small circle of yellow. Shadows pool in the corners, comfortable and familiar. Dust drifts through the lamplight, rising and falling in slow, lazy swirls before settling on the table, the chair, the windowsill. The same dust that once felt like an enemy, clinging to everything, swallowing the road, stinging your eyes, now feels like part of your life, neutral and ordinary. It settles on the fence rails you set, on the rows you planted, on the roof you patched. It settles on the path between your cabin and the barn, on the steps where you sit sometimes with your coffee in the morning, watching the land wake up. You lie down on your narrow bed, the straw mattress familiar now, the weight of the blankets just right. Through the window you can see a slice of sky, a few stars peeking between the shutters. The wind sighs around the cabin, but the walls hold. The stove ticks softly as it cools. You think back over all the might-happens you've worried about. Getting lost on the trail, running out of water, misreading a room, misjudging a storm. Some of them came close, some of them brushed your life and kept moving. Others were nothing more than shadows in your imagination. What actually happened was simpler and stranger. You learned to read clouds and people. You learned how to tie a better knot, how to patch a roof, how to sit quietly with your own company without feeling like you were disappearing. You stopped being someone at the edge of the map and became one of the dots on it. Surviving the Wild West, you realise, wasn't about outsmarting it or outmuscling it. It was about learning its rhythms and letting them shape your days. Work and rest, heat and cold, planting and harvest, town and trail, strangers and neighbours. All the ordinary things that strung together make a life. Outside, the dust is settling again. On the fields, on the fence, on the empty road into town. Inside, your thoughts do the same, drifting down, becoming still. You close your eyes. The cabin creaks once, as if adjusting its old bones for the night. The West, for this moment, is not wild or harsh or demanding. It's just quiet. And so, our journey for tonight comes to a quiet close. The story lingers, like the last glow of candlelight, as you drift further into rest. If these gentle wanderings bring you peace, I invite you to like and subscribe so that whenever you wish, you may return and we can travel together once more. For now, dear listener, may your dreams be kind and your night be restful. Until next time.